the story of Christopher McCandless. And I have to say, watching this film, of the movies I've seen this year, it was the only one to be like a punch in the gut in terms of the visceral reaction I had to it. It was a deeply moving and emotional film.
And this is for Chris.
An unknown hiker had been found in the wilderness in Alaska, and the more I read, like the hairs on the back of my neck all stood up.
I'm just doing a little tribute to Christopher McCandless, a.k.a. Alexander Supertramp.
People don't get it. He didn't even have a fucking map. What kind of idiot? That was the point. There's no blank spots on the map anymore, anywhere on Earth. You want a blank spot on the map, you got to leave the map behind.
But this movie, Into the Wild, based on a true story, is garnering so much attention.
That photo of him sitting in the chair in front of the bus where he's got this big shit-eating grin on his face, that's what life was like. He was digging it, no doubt.
It's true that there are some things that you can't experience with someone else. There's places you can't go in your head when you're in company. You can only go there alone.
He wasn't this misanthrope who just was, fuck the world, it's all evil, I just want to go live by myself. That wasn't it. He was here for a reason. He wasn't running away forever. It was this adventure. It was to prove himself.
And the way he wrote about his own travels was sometimes like he was imagining the movie of his life already.
Absolutely.
By the time I was 23, I decided I would try to climb it by a new route by myself. Then I very nearly died. And it was way more reckless and stupid than what Chris did. But I got lucky, and I climbed this thing and I survived. So that's why I have a great deal of sympathy for Chris.
Homeless shelters, hitchhiking everywhere. But he was very smart, he read this very sophisticated philosophy like Tolstoy and Thoreau, which fueled it. And his ultimate adventure was to go into Alaska and live off the land with almost no supplies, which he did for 113 days, which is really quite an extraordinary feat.
Caution can be something that keeps you alive, and it can also be a disease. And somehow I think that's why you want to keep testing yourself to some degree, so you don't lose that kind of connection with things and with your own abilities.
How can one be well when one suffers morally? Tolstoy asked this question in one of Chris's favorite books, War and Peace. What Tolstoy said was true, and Chris McCandless faced a moral suffering. John Krakauer makes us aware of Chris's moral suffering on page 121 of Into the Wild. Chris's smoldering anger, it turns out, was fueled by a discovery he had made 2 summers earlier, during his cross-country wanderings. Chris pieced together facts of his father's previous marriage and subsequent divorce, facts to which he hadn't been privy. Walt's split from his first wife, Marcia, was not a clean, amicable parting. Long after falling in love with Billy, long after she gave birth to Chris, Walt continued his relationship with Marcia, in secret, dividing his time between 2 households, 2 families. Lies were told and then exposed. More lies to explain away the initial deceptions. 2 years after Chris was born, Walt fathered another son, Quinn McCandless, with Marcia. When Walt's double life came to light, the revelations inflicted deep wounds. All parties suffered terribly. On page 64 of Into the Wild, we see another example of friction between Walt and Chris. It says, Westberg's latter conjecture, as it turned out, was a fairly astute analysis of the relationship between Chris and Walt McCandless. Both father and son were stubborn and high-strung. Given Walt's need to exert control on Chris's extravagantly independent nature, polarization was inevitable. He brooded at length of what he perceived to be his father's moral shortcomings, the hypocrisy of his parents' lifestyle, the tyranny. Eventually Chris rebelled, and when he finally did, it was with characteristic immoderation. I believe there is some unclarity about why Chris decided to leave his previous life and venture into Alaska. Page 22 of Into the Wild illustrates Chris's intentions. driving west out of Atlanta, he intended to invent an utterly new life for himself, one in which he would be free to wallow in unfiltered experiences, to symbolize complete severance from his previous life. He even adopted a new name. No longer would he answer to Chris McCandless. He was now Alexander Supertramp, master of his own destiny. Chris was the master of his own destiny, and that is why I believe so many admire him. Chris discovered a path to ultimate freedom, a world of beauty in nature, where there was no laws, no parents, just ultimate, unconditional freedom. Chris was discussing his dream about an Alaskan adventure. He said these words, "Freedom and simple beauty is too good to pass up." Chris, like many others, was mesmerized by the beauty of nature. Chris simply wanted to be a part of what he so deeply admired. Chris committed no crime. He made a personal choice to live out in the wild alone, something that he asked others to do as well. So many people live with unhappy circumstances, and yet will not take the initiative to change their situation because they are conditioned to a life of security, conformity, and conservatism, all of which may appear to give one peace of mind, but in reality nothing is more dangerous to the adventurous spirit within a man than a secure future. The basic core of a man's living spirit is his passion for adventure. The joy of life comes from our encounters with new experiences, and hence there is no greater joy than to have an endlessly changing horizon, for each day to have a new and different sun. Leo Tolstoy said in War and Peace, "One must believe in the possibility of happiness in order to be happy, and now I believe in it. Let the dead bury the dead, but while I'm alive, I must live and be happy." Tolstoy said, "Man cannot possess anything as long as he fears death, but to him who does not fear it, everything belongs. If there was no suffering, man would not know his limits, would not know himself." I believe these two quotes tell us that Chris was happy, and Chris lived. More importantly than Chris died, Chris lived.
I mean, you're really good. I mean, you're like 100,000 times better than like any apple I've ever had. I'm not Superman, I'm Super Tramp. You're Super Apple. You're so tasty. You're so organic. So natural. You're the apple of my eye. Huh?
His name was Jeremiah Johnson. They say he wanted to be a mountain man. Story goes that he was a man of proper wit and adventurous spirit, suited to the mountains. Nobody knows whereabouts he come from, and don't seem to matter much. He was a young man, and ghosty stories about the tall hills didn't scare him none. He was looking for a Hawken gun, 50 caliber or better. He settled for a 30, but damn, it was a genuine Hawken. You couldn't go no better. Bought him a good horse and traps, another truck that went with being a mountain man, and just said goodbye to whatever life was down there below.
Just where is it I could find bear, beaver, and other critters worth cash money when skinned?
Ride due west as the sun sets. Turn left at the Rocky Mountains.
Here's his story. Jeremiah Johnson made his way into the mountain. And some folks say he's up there still.